And hello, everyone. Hope y'all are having a good day today. This is our first, we had the con hour. Now we're on the Con-Versation. We are here with Anne Scottlin with Live for Joy. I keep trying to call it live, but Live for Joy. She is an author. She's also a podcaster. And did I read motivational speaker in there?
Yes.
So pretty good memory for
There you go. There you go. Perfect.
So let's talk a little bit about your books. So what got you started into writing?
Oh my goodness, Greg, I started writing. I don't even know when I actually started writing. I was writing before I was writing. So as a very little kid, my mom was a home ec teacher back in the day. And so we cooked a lot. I cooked with her and I got so excited about recipes and I wanted to write a recipe or a recipe book. But I didn't even know how to write really yet. And so I was probably 6 years old. And so I have my first thing that I ever wrote, which is a recipe for vegetable soup. And it's all drawn. It has pictures of a whole carrot and then a knife and then chunks of carrot. And then there's a potato. And then it's so this was me trying to write before I could even write. My dad and grandmother were both, informal poets. They loved writing poetry. And so, my dad hadn't for years, but he gave me an old notebook of his and I saw some of my grandmother's. And so I got really inspired by poetry. I think as a young kid, I started writing my first few rhymes. And by 10, I wrote my first short play and starred in it, of course, because it was a small production. But I wrote my first play when I was 10. And then it just kept going ever after that. Writing, of course, I was interested in journaling and always wanted to write and be published. And in high school, I was really fortunate to have a great teacher that inspired me in that direction. So I was already published in a magazine my senior year in high school, and then continued to be published informally in, academic and local papers and magazines for a long time. And that's just kind of how I got rolling.
My daughter has special needs and that cookbook would help her.
Yeah, she should have a copy. It'd be perfect, right? Seriously, that's a really good idea.
Hey, it works.
Yeah, for sure. Pretty self-explanatory.
Now, from what you were just saying, I would usually ask what's the biggest inspiration for your writing, but it almost sounds like it would be your grandparents.
Well, yeah, my grandmother's writing, the fact that she loved poetry. I didn't know her very well. She lived far away and I rarely saw her, but it definitely inspired me. And my parents, I would say a good inspiration for my writing. I was in a TV-free home growing up. I had lots of complaints about that, but that's what it was. But because of that, we did a lot of reading. Before I could read, my parents, like everyone will read their children bedtime stories or whatever, but they were prolific readers. And I remember showing off at age 5 when I couldn't read yet. I was showing off. People would come over to the house and I would say, "Let me read you a book." And they're like, "Okay." And they'd sit on the couch and I would go through this kid's picture book and read it word for word, except I didn't read it. It was all memorized. And they were like, "Oh, I can't believe she can read so fluently." And so the reading to me made a big difference. And then having a back then, electronic free home, TV and electronic, free device free home. As I got older, 8, 9, 10 into my early teenage years, I read books voluminously. There was nothing else. So reading made me fall in love with language, with words. Like the thesaurus is my best friend. Wordcraft is what gets me excited. And whenever I'm in a meeting or a business meeting and people start talking about the wording of something, I just get all excited. I'm like, oh, let me do it. Let me do it. So I kind of fell in love with words and with story. Fascinated with story, and later and even got 2 degrees in history, because it is really the story of us. And I found that hugely fascinating.
Well, it's got to be, even back in my day, electronics, the TV was almost radios and TVs. So that had to have been an experience itself.
Yeah, that was different. And really no radio either. Yeah, very limited.
So how many times did you go to a friend's house to just maybe watch a show or?
Well, the tricky thing was I didn't have really any friends because I was homeschooled till I was almost 16. And it wasn't just homeschool like now where you have you meet other kids and know their homeschool parents several times a week. This was out in the middle of the country, far, very remote environment. So I didn't have that option. So it was pretty isolated. I had to start being creative at a young age because there was basically zero entertainment. So I had to create my own. And that was a huge part of my imagination. I have a crazy imagination. That's where it just took a root because there was nothing to distract from it.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about your books without giving away any spoilers?
Oh, sure. So Live for Joy is the book that came out last year. And it's a motivational and inspirational book. Very beautiful. It's very short messages written by me. I'm a part-time philosopher. It's not poetry, but motivation and inspiration for people. What I really wanted to do was write a personal empowerment book that you could get benefit from, even if you only had a minute or two in a day. So this book, it's 12 chapters, 280 pages, a nice size book. And every page has just a very short message and accompanying artwork. So here's, I picked all these myself. Here's 2 men on junks in China Sea there where that beautiful. And what it says is contentment is the art of finding joy in the moment, regardless of how much you have or what you accomplish. So contentment isn't what car you're driving or, the house you have. And a lot of I'll tell you a little bit more about the chapters here, seeing if I can find, there's a lot about nature because I find that nature is such an important part of our emotional wellness. I mean, my expertise is around emotional wellness. I've been in the industry of emotional wellness and motivation for over a decade. So we talk about things like being creative is really important to your emotional wellness. My apologies. That was to remind me of something that I'm doing now. Getting connected to your own creative force and how important that is, taking time in nature, listening to your inner genius, which is your gut. And again, all of these are how can you find small achievable ways in your life to really live for joy. Little bits and little bits of tidbits of of encouragement and inspiration. Here's one. It's kind of an odd page, but it's a really elaborate lock. It's almost artistic on a historic door. And it says the door to wisdom is often locked by the bolt of ego. So if you want a little philosophical moment, you have that. And then you also have some really practical adventure and imagination. I love this one. You'll like this one. It's this little boy and he's in the paper cardboard airplane having a blast. And this is in the chapter about imagination. It says the joy of adventure, the magic of discovering for the first time, the beautiful and the bright. This childhood heart is still within, just waiting to be discovered again. Because sometimes we kind of lose that childhood romance with the world and that wide-eyed wonder that's so beautiful, right? And then I have 2 favorite chapters. One is chapter 3, which is what are one of the ways we can increase joy in our life. And it's be a benevolent world citizen. So it's really about when you bring kindness and joy to others, you really increase your own. And that's the big secret to happiness or joy, in my opinion, is, some people will say, you can't give away what you don't have. And I'm like, I beg to differ, because when it comes to joy or happiness, you can have a really crappy day. And I've got some good stories of my own about that. Really crappy day. and maybe you're just talking to customer support. and, and then I ended up kind of seeing a window opportunity on a long hold with someone, and ended up mentioning something, and they got super excited about making a change in their life, like going on a trip because they'd never traveled and they'd been meaning to, and they just didn't do it. And they were so excited by the time we hung up. And I was like, I was happy too, because I was having a crap day, but by bringing a little joy and hope and encouragement to help, just inspiration to someone else, I'm like, oh, it's okay, really, like it's really okay. So that's one. And my other favorite one is the last chapter in the book is chapter 12. And it's called Learn to Love the Endings, because so often we think of endings as being a bad thing, the end of perfect health, or the end of a job, or the end of a relationship. And I think it's really important that we realize that in most ways, endings are in some form or another a new beginning. And if we didn't have endings, we could never grow. We could never evolve into our best selves and grow and improve. And here's just a really simple, here's a really simple one with beautiful picture. It's of an older couple having coffee outside. I just love this picture. And it says, gratitude and joy are ageless, even as time goes by. Gratitude and joy are never old. They're never outdated. And it's never too late to have gratitude and joy in your life. So I'm a coach and a teacher and a trainer and a speaker and this around emotional wellness. So that's my book, Live for Joy. And then I've got a couple new books coming out, but we won't have time for those today. So we'll just stick to this one.
Now, with all this and motivational speaker, it almost sounds like you're also into the metaphysical side of things, like Reiki.
I am. Not as much as you might think, though. I'm really just exploring it for the first time. A lot of those things. I mean, yes, I've done yoga, and yes, I've been in Reiki classes, but not as a practitioner per se. Or you might have guessed that I grew up in an extremely remote, sort of borderline cult-like religious environment. And so very structured thinking around what and wasn't permissible around your spirituality. And so after spending literally years and decades kind of getting free in order to just find myself and who I am and what my purpose is in the world independently, then lately in the last few years, I've been kind of like slowly going back to finding what is, say, spirituality for me. And I think it can be different for absolutely everyone. So that's been an exciting journey for me, reaching back out and finding, taking from all of the best and finding those things that inspire. And I find like there's so many people in that same position. They either had a bad religious experience or something abusive, or they just don't know where to start. And they're like, I don't want to ask anyone because they're just going to preach at me and tell me there's only one way to do it. And that doesn't sound quite right.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I was actually trained by a Reiki master for a little bit. So I know about the energy and the energy following thought.
That's amazing.
So
that is amazing. I would love to learn more all about that, because it appeals to me and I get really excited about it.
It's very interesting. And I was taught how to feel when you're actually doing the raking. So it's
wow. That is what an amazing talent to cultivate.
You really have to be in the mindset to do it.
I'm sure. I'm sure that makes so much sense. And I know you interview a lot of actors and musicians and other people on the show. So I'm also an actor. So after my crazy journey through, I don't know, I think I have 9 lives in one already, but anyway, I decided to find myself and move to Hollywood and become an actress. So I worked actively in Hollywood for about a decade. Nothing super famous, but I do have an IMDb page and I do have quite a few credits. Nice. And I still do. In fact, right before we started, I got a text from one of my agents saying I have an audition. So
cool.
That was, another area to really develop my creativity and to obviously have more opportunities to write, do some more, small screenplays, production, and of course, acting, being very involved on the creative side. So it used to be that was my primary focus. And now there's been a little bit of a shift where I think my coaching and teaching business has taken a little more time, because you can only book so much, right? Acting. Yes. So once you've had years and years and years of training, you're like, I kind of know how this goes now. But so I do a little less, but I still keep active in it as well. Cause I think it's one of those things you invest in. So you're like, I'm not going to just let that go.
Now you also have a podcast.
I do. It's called Scotland Talks, just like my name, Scottlin. It's hashtag Scotland Talks. It's a weekly podcast, and we talk mostly about emotional wellness. I do individual shows, I do guest shows, and we talk about really finding your joy, learning to live. What are small steps you can take every day, nothing dramatic, no massive life overhaul necessarily, to start experiencing more joy in your life and becoming aware what brings it to you and what takes it away, because it's not always what we think it is.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Now, with the guests, what kind of guests do you normally have on the show?
Yeah. So a lot of practitioners of different things around emotional wellness. I've had a couple recently around, animal therapies and working with animals. I personally have 3 rescued dogs, which bring me enormous amounts of joy. So I'm a little partial to animals. We sometimes have some spiritual people on there to discuss, how does emotional and spiritual integrate? Other health professionals, teachers, mindset, occasional therapists, and authors of all kinds of work that supports emotional wellness and happiness. So it's usually a pretty fun, upbeat show, and we talk a lot about practical steps again to, bringing more joy into your life. Or I'll have folks on, like yesterday, I had a lady on who's an author, but she also had cancer, and how she found actually kind of new motivation in life as she pulled through that, really changed her vision, gave her a reason to really care about the joy in her life, as opposed to just, oh, that's life, let's get through it. It's like, no, every day is so valuable. Like, why would I want to waste that just complaining? How can I help other people, raise their own level of joy and wellness in their life? How can I live the life I want? And then she went and did a 2,000-kilometer trip on her bike in her 60s to raise money for emotional and mental health awareness. So really cool, the kind of guests that I get to have on there. It's a lot of fun.
And just so people know, because I know we do have first-time watchers, if you saw me kind of snicker there, it's not because of her bad health. It's because I'm an author, and I've been going through stage 4 cancer for 13 years. I'm actually going on 14. So,
wow, that's incredible.
So, I wasn't laughing at her misfortune. Trust
no,
me.
but you related to it, which is so important. Yes. I mean, and that's an even more relevant discussion, because rarely do I get to talk to someone on the show who is still in that challenging place. And you're still in it, or you're recovered?
Still in it. We're talking about moving the last bit of it next year.
Wow.
So after 14 years, it'll be like, finally.
Wow. Well, blessings to you, because that's such a long, drawn out challenge. People don't understand, if you haven't had a critical health scare or a long-term chronic experience with your health, you just don't understand. I've been very fortunate. I haven't suffered a disease that debilitating yet in my life. But I have had some bad accidents physically, and I have had 2 back surgeries. I have a lot of metal in me, and I lived with chronic pinched nerve pain for years. So I know what it's like to just feel like all you can do in the day sometimes is wake up and watch TV in bed. And then this can go on for like a year, because you can't function. The drugs make it so you can't think. You can't be creative. You can't write. It's just so frustrating, and kind of like being like this functional human, but people kind of look fine on the outside, which is even worse, because people think like you think you're fine, but you're like, I can't even really form thoughts some days. Like, it's very frustrating. So you've got my empathy in the little bit that I have there of what it's like to live like that.
Well, not only do you, like you said, she sees joy in different things, but it also makes you stronger inside, physically and mentally.
Wow.
Because you have to keep your strength up in order to keep going.
You do. And just learning what it is, how important health is, and doing all the things you can to preserve your health. My mom just went through her second bout of breast cancer. Unfortunately, she's in remission now. So we're really grateful. But, you just take everything up a notch so often, and how precious health is. And changing lifestyle habits along the way. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a full recovery, you never forget. Like, you don't just go back to all the bad habits because you're like,
No.
I can't risk it.
Now, where can people find your books?
Oh, thank you. So Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, a lot of the book platforms, or you can just go straight to my site, which is annescottlin.com. If you happen to just be listening, here's my name spelling. It's ANNE. So Anne with an E, Scottlin, SCOTTLIN, not the country, LIN, annescottlin.com.
That help?
I've been introduced as Anne Scotland many times, which I don't mind at all, but it won't get you to the website.
Won't get you to the country either.
Right? Exactly. No, you're just going to be stuck spinning there in virtual la la land, right?
Hey, it happens. You never know.
It does. It does to me.
But I do want to thank you for coming on. And people
thank you,
check out her
Greg.
podcast and check out her website. I do have it on the YouTube. I'll have to add it to LinkedIn and Facebook page so people can get to it.
Thank you.
But definitely thank you for coming on. And
you.
again, let other people know the next show for the Con Hour will be Thursday at 6 p.m. And we're having John Grimian on the show, who does My Hero Academia. And he also does a bunch of, I think I'm going to have to go back and reread, but he's been doing this for 20 years. So he does quite a bit.
Very
so
nice.
Until Thursday, everyone,